my biggest hobby is mechanical. So I've been fiddling around with repairing anything mechanical. And I do remember that after the Japanese lost, the Dutch wanted to come back, and but the Indonesian people don't want them to. So the Dutch asked the British to come in and help them secure the area. But the Indonesians started fighting, and the thing I remember is that the first arrival of the British were fought back by the Indonesians. So the British never really landed, and that was in the port city of Surabaya. We were in Lawang. At that time, I only knew that that finally the Dutch came anyway, and practically the whole of East Java was occupied by the Dutch, and my father helped fight the Dutch. And that's where I only remember that he always brings me when he was smuggling arms for the Indonesian people. And the arms were bought from Dutch soldiers. That's all I remember, and I knew it because my dad always brings me along during the smuggling, because he always used an old car, the Citroen car, and I was the one that could repair the transmission that always gets loose. So that's why my parents brought me along.
How old were you then?
I think around 9 years old. And it's easier for me because also what happens is that I can just crawl underneath the car and repair it, and nobody would know. And another thing that I remember is also that car always breaks down, and we didn't have any parts. Actually, the cylinder packing is the one that always breaks. So I did make new packing from cardboard impregnated with fat, with just grease. But of course it doesn't last long. It lasts only just enough for 1 day driving, and then you have to take the cylinder apart again and put new packing. That's all I remember. I don't have much friends, first of all because I also use the vacation time. I used to volunteer at factories, and I used to volunteer at the factory where in the company where my father works, and I volunteer looking and repairing equipment that is used there. Among others, equipment to make suitcases, and also equipment to make the leather seals for the pumps in sugar factories. And then they also make shoes. And there, what happened was this, that the company imported shoe machineries from I think Switzerland, but when they arrived, nobody could operate it because some things may be missing. So I volunteered, and the owner approves that I experiment with the machines because it was very difficult to get technicians from abroad. And so I took apart one of those shoe machineries and completely to the smallest screws, and then put it back together again. And I don't know what happened, but it starts working. So I don't even know what the mistake was. That's one thing that I remember, among others. One other thing very important to remember is that I got from my parents, is that just after the war, we had very difficult because all the money is gone. We didn't have much money, and actually my parents had only money for just one day. But at that time, a friend of my father came and asked for help because his wife was in trouble and was very ill, and they don't have money to buy medicines. So my father gave all the money to him so that he can use it for the medicines for his friend's wife. And when everybody was objecting to that, my father said, the wife may not live if we don't help, but we don't know what's happening with us. We may have something else tomorrow. And that gave a real big, that has a real big influence on me. Well, my uncle, who is the dean at the Erlangga State University for the medical department, wants me to take medicine, but I refused. But I do like their lab and workshop. And at that time, actually, I even managed to build a kind of an electrocardiogram for the hospital there, because there were no equipment after the war. And I managed by using a very interestingly, very primitive, buying the radio tubes that I can buy in the second-hand market. And also for the graph, I just used a needle which runs on an emptied can of butter, which I put an axle on, but before we use it, we blackened it with the flame from a candle, and the needle just runs on there, and that's where the doctor reads the electrocardiogram. Well, it doesn't last long because after a while, I made several actually, and after a while the real equipment came, so I don't know where it came from, maybe donated by some other company, other country, but anyway, mine is not used anymore. But I still refuse to go to the medical department because I don't like the thing. I don't like dealing with sick people. And that's where it gets very interesting, because the first time I went in there was a big fight. Because at this, let's say that's an Institute of Economics, something like that. There was a student union, and they require everybody to be a member. And I'm just a stubborn guy, so I don't want to become a member. And what they did was that if I don't want to become a member, then they don't want to give me lectures, the copies of lectures which they translated from some books. But I still refused, and there was a big trouble. So I formed another group from students that agrees with me, and instead of taking notes from books and trying to distribute it as something to help the students, because books were very rare at that moment, and I spoke very fluently Dutch, so I decided to translate all the lectures which were done in Dutch by Dutch lecturers, and stenciling it and giving it to people that don't belong to that student union. So finally the student union gave up, and since the stenciled material that I gave was more up to date with what the lecturers are saying, so mine is more popular, and I only gave it to people that don't join that union. So finally the union was dissolved. That's the first fight. And I got a lot of help from the Dutch lecturers at that time, because they like it that I speak Dutch. I'm even allowed to go to their house where they run a tape, the old-fashioned tape where it's in rolls, and they put the lectures on there in Dutch, and I translated it in Indonesian and stenciled it. So we got the real authentic lectures. And after 2 years, I think, they made me also the coordinator of the Department of Economics. There was a fight between the communists, well, not the real physical fight, but then it was getting real bad between communists and the non-communists. And at a certain point, the communists want me to keep the university open, but the anti-communists want me to close it. So first the communists kidnapped me and said that I should open it. Okay, so after that they brought me back after I opened it for a few days, and then the non-communists kidnapped me, and actually if I keep opening the whole thing, they would probably kill me. But there is a mistake that they made, and that is that the people that are kidnapping me were from my former students. So I just talked over with them, and we agreed that they let me go, and I just treat them with soto ayam on the side of the road. So that's what happened. And the funny thing is this, that lately, that's after I moved to the US and I came back to Indonesia, one of the guys that kidnapped me came during the meetings that I had with the alumni and said, "Hey, do you remember me?" I said, "No." "Well, I was one of the guys that kidnapped you." That was the funny thing. But after a while, I think the Ministry of Education got a little bit fed up with me, and but they didn't dare to throw me out of the university, of my job, because the students were behind me, and they're afraid that there will be demonstrations if they let me go. So they found another way of getting rid of me, and that is because actually immediately after I graduated from the Department of Economics, I applied for a scholarship to go to the US. But that scholarship was refused because at that time, economics people are not supposed to go to a capitalist country to study. So that was refused. But they use it as an excuse when they want to get me out, and that's by asking me to come to Jakarta to talk. And when I talked to the minister, they just gave me a passport and said, you asked for a scholarship. Well, you got it, you just go. And of course I refused, because I have not even said anything to my parents, and nobody knows. I cannot just go to Jakarta and then not coming back and just go. So I devised a trick, because I knew the dean of the Department of Economics very well at that time. And I told the minister that I cannot go because I have not corrected an exam that I took, and the students may get mad. And of course he doesn't believe it, so I asked him to phone the dean at the time, who knows me very well, and he immediately understands that I didn't want to go. And he told the minister that I cannot go because I have to correct that first. When the minister said that he had to correct the whole thing, he refused. He said he cannot do it because he is a lawyer, not an economist. So finally the minister agreed for me to get back home for 2 weeks. But of course I stayed for more than a month. But then they picked me up with people from the Navy. Of course I had to go. So that's how I ended up at Yale University, and then after that moves to Ohio State, because the professor with whom I followed at Yale University moved to Ohio State. I arrived in the U.S. and then I forgot where I arrived. I think it was in L.A., but then they sent me over to Yale University, and at Yale University, I arrived exactly on August 17th, which is Indonesian Independence Day. And it was customary at Yale University that during Independence Day, the International Students Office hoists the flag of the country. And there were quite a few Malaysian students there. And at that time, Indonesia had political trouble with Malaysia. They took the flag down and trampled it. And of course, I got very mad. So I went to the office and I saw that the Malaysian flag was also displayed inside the office, but inside a locked glass, cabinet, yeah. So I was so mad, I broke the glass, took the Malaysian flag, tear it apart, and also trampled it. So the Malaysian students were so mad. I think there were, 5 or 6, and wanted to beat me up. Of course, I cannot fight alone against them because there were no Indonesian students at that time at Yale. So what I did, I went behind the counter and used a chair to defend myself until the police arrived. I don't exactly know what happened, but the police just asked questions and they let me go, but they took some of the Malaysian students there. But there was another incident that happens. After that, I think some organizations at the university, and also it was a news organization, I think, asked me whether I was willing to debate about the Malaysian-Indonesian problem. Well, I didn't know too much, and but there are a lot of Malaysians there, and quite a few are graduates and really, let's say, very proficient in politics. So at that time, I phoned the Indonesian embassy and told them what problem I have. And the Indonesian embassy was very good in assisting me by sending one of their scholars to me to train me for the debate for about a week. Actually, during that week, I didn't even follow lectures at the university, but just followed the instructions of this guy to how to debate all those things. And he also brought a lot of brochures that I could distribute during the debate. Of course, with all that information, I'm doing very well during the debate. And I started distributing the leaflets, and that's where I got in trouble with the police, with the campus police, because I'm not supposed to distribute political pamphlets at the university. But anyway, everything turns out okay. They let me go. I went back to the university and worked for the university. And that's why one day I got the assignment to pick up a car for the Department of Economics from the Minister of Education in Jakarta. And on the way back, that's where I got another adventure. That's where there was a hold up by communists on the road, and instead of stopping and getting killed, I decided to ram the roadblock and run away. Yeah, when we rammed the roadblock, it hit the radiator and the radiator started leaking. But luckily we found a secluded dirt road, and on that dirt road, a little bit far away from where those people that were trying to hold us up. There was a small creek, and we filled it water from the creek. And the leak, we just patched the leak with soap. Because at that time, there were no good hotels, so we always travel having towels and soap and everything. That's basically what happened. So we arrived quite okay at home. But the third time I was kidnapped, not because of the university, but because of the business side. When the company went bankrupt, there was a lot of between shareholders, but because I signed the agreement with the bank for the material, and so the other party wanted to take the material because the company went bankrupt and want to sell it on the open market. And they brought the police to do that. So I brought in the Navy because I had connections with the Navy. So the Navy sent their trucks and brought products to Jakarta, brought it to the bank. That was when I was kidnapped. But then there was Oma that got me out, because Oma was angry and went to the I think the chief of the army in Surabaya, and a man named General Sumitro, very well known there. And Oma doesn't know him, but she went there and said, explained the situation, and that he should tell the police to take his hands off me, because I was running away to Jakarta. And Oma was in Surabaya. Oma was angry, and but the general said, we don't want to have anything to do with that. That's not our business. Then Oma started telling that general, if you don't do anything, then I'll go to the students at Erlangga and Vidya Mandala and have them demonstrate. So he phoned the police, and the police didn't dare to do anything and let me go. So I started working there, and at the match factory, where I had a lot of fun, because you see, this company is a big company and is selling the majority of matches in Indonesia with a brand. I think the brand was Bear. But it got a lot of competition from a Chinese brand that came in, that was smuggled in the country through the Navy. So it uses Navy ships to bring the product in, and it's very cheap, so we couldn't compete. So the director of that company asked me what I can do about it. So I said, well, can I experiment? So he said, yeah, and you can get anything you want as long as you make sure that they cannot sell. So I asked for a leave of 3 months, where I went to all the dealers of this company all over Indonesia and find out how things are going. And after that, I came back and told him, okay, but I need money to compete with them. So he said, okay, but what do you want to do it? I said, it's a very strange thing. It's not really, it doesn't belong to the marketing theory, but it's a very abnormal, let's say, thing that I want to do. He said, oh, I explained to him, and he said, okay, I can get any money I want. So what I did was this, told all the dealers that are located in harbor cities, and where they used to import the Chinese matches. And I told all the dealers, whenever it arrives, buy it up. Not 100%, but let's say 80% or so, buy it up and store it. And we give you the money to buy it up. And they were, of course, asking what to do with it. They said, don't do anything, just keep it in your warehouse. So that's what happened. And it happened, I think, until three or four shipments of those matches came in, which took, I think, about 4 months or something. And at that time I said, okay, now wait until it arrives again. By the time it arrives, sell all your stock at half the price of what you bought for. And then that it's on our loss because we pay you anyway. So that's what happened. So finally nobody wants to import or buy the Chinese thing again. And that's how we got rid of the imported Chinese matches. And after that, everything was running smooth, so I got a little bit bored.